When we talk about the Battle of Britain, the narrative often focuses on the heroes in the cockpits of the Spitfire and Hurricane. That image is powerful, but it is also a profound oversimplification that obscures the true nature of the conflict. This was not a duel of gentlemen pilots over the English countryside. It was a brutal industrial and psychological endurance contest, a collision of two air forces under immense pressure to break an enemy's will before their own resources, and their own nations, shattered from within. The most critical fact is this. By September 1940, both sides, the British and the German, were operating on a knife's edge of exhaustion, convinced they were losing. The Luftwaffe's bomber crews were suffering casualty rates that, had they been sustained, would have made the force combat ineffective in weeks. The battle was ultimately decided not by a single moment of aerial brilliance, but by a series of flawed German assumptions about the nature of modern warfare, and by a British system of integrated defense that proved just resilient enough to endure relentless systemic pressure. The lesson here is not about plucky underdogs. It's about the fragile mechanics of a nation under total siege, and the catastrophic consequences of misunderstanding your enemy's center of gravity. The German strategy was built on a fundamental misdiagnosis of British psychology. The Luftwaffe entered the battle with an operational playbook perfected over Poland and France: achieve air superiority by drawing enemy fighters into a decisive, annihilating battle. When Fighter Command, under Hugh Dowding, refused to take this bait and instead fought a disciplined war of interception and attrition, German planning began to unravel. The shift in late August to the systematic bombing of RAF airfields and sector stations was a logical and nearly successful tactical adaptation, but the core strategic thinking remained flawed. The German High Command, and particularly Hermann Göring, believed Britain was a nation on the brink of political collapse, its will brittle. They operated under the assumption that a sharp, violent shock, what they called a Nervenkrieg or War of Nerves, would push the British government to sue for peace. This was a catastrophic misreading. It led to a critical and often overlooked failure. The Luftwaffe never developed a true strategic bombing doctrine aimed at crippling war production. Its aircraft, particularly the medium bombers, like the Heinkel, He-111 and the Dornier Du-17, were designed for army support, not for the sustained independent strategic campaign now required. Their bomb loads were light, their navigation systems primitive for night or poor weather operations, and their defensive armament weak. The German focus remained on causing a psychological break, not on methodically dismantling the industrial and command infrastructure that allowed Britain to resist. The British victory was less about the fighter plane and more about the system behind the pilot. While the Spitfire captured the public imagination, the unsung hero was an integrated system of command, control, and intelligence that was unprecedented in warfare. This system, often called the Dowding system after the head of Fighter Command, was a triumph of organization and technology. Its most critical node was not the cockpit, but the filter room at Fighter Command headquarters. Here, raw data from the Chain-O radar stations and the Observer Corps was synthesized, deconflicted, and turned into a coherent tactical picture. This picture was then transmitted via dedicated telephone lines to the sector control rooms, often housed in underground bunkers at airfields like Uxbridge or Hornchurch. Here, the sector controller, often a non-flying officer, would literally move counters across a large map table and direct pilots via radio to intercept incoming raids. This system allowed for a staggering economy of force. Squadrons could be held on the ground until the last possible moment, conserving precious fuel and pilot energy, and then vectored precisely onto enemy formations. It negated the need for standing patrols, which would have drained resources in days. The survival lesson is profound. It was not the individual component, but the robust, redundant network connecting them that provided resilience. When the Luftwaffe began bombing the sector stations in late August 1940, they were finally attacking the true nervous system. The fact that these underground bunkers proved incredibly hard to destroy is a key reason the system held. We often discuss the battle in terms of machines and strategy, but honestly, the limiting factor was human physiology and psychology pushed to its absolute limit. For the pilots, this wasn't just a series of dogfights, it was a relentless cycle of exhaustion. A pilot in a frontline squadron during the height of the battle could expect to fly multiple sorties a day. The constant adrenaline spikes, the G-forces in combat, the physical strain of manipulating a fighter aircraft with no powered controls, and the ever-present fear created a state of chronic fatigue. The few were being burned out at an alarming rate. Replacements were rushed through operational training units with sometimes fatal inadequacy. The real crisis was not just a shortage of pilots, but a shortage of experienced pilots. The average life expectancy of a new pilot in some squadrons was measured in a handful of sorties. On the German side, the strain was different, but just as severe. Luftwaffe bomber and aircrew losses were unsustainable. A German airman flying over England knew he was facing a well-organized defense, and that a bailout over the Channel or English countryside meant almost certain capture, not a return to his unit. This attrition sapped morale and operational effectiveness in a force not prepared for a long war of attrition. The battle became a test of which manpower system would crack first. Britain could draw on pilots from the Commonwealth and occupied Europe. Germany could not easily replace its highly trained pre-war Kampfflieger. On September 7, 1940, the Luftwaffe shifted its main effort from RAF airfields to the City of London. This is often portrayed as a pivotal blunder born of revenge for a minor RAF raid on Berlin. While anger was a factor, the shift was also a logical conclusion of the German strategic misdiagnosis. If the goal was to break British will, then striking the political and population center seemed direct. But it was a fatal de-escalation of pressure on Fighter Command's critical infrastructure. It gave the battered sector stations and radar sites a vital week to repair. However, to view this solely as a German mistake is to miss the point. The Blitz on London did not represent a new, coherent strategy. It was the old shock strategy applied to a bigger target. The Luftwaffe still lacked the heavy bombers, the navigational aids, and the targeting doctrine to cripple specific war industries. The bombing remained area bombing intended to cause terror and social collapse. It failed for the same reason the earlier phase failed. It underestimated the resilience of the state and the populace, and overestimated the psychological impact of indiscriminate violence. Furthermore, it had a unifying effect on British society, hardening resolve rather than shattering it. This miscalculation would echo later in the war, informing both the failed German bombing of the Soviet Union and the Allied strategic bombing campaigns over Europe. The Battle of Britain endures not as a myth of solo heroes, but as a definitive case study in the complex interplay of technology, intelligence, industrial capacity, and human endurance in modern war. It demonstrates that victory in a total conflict rarely hinges on a single weapon or a moment of courage, but on the depth and resilience of an entire system. From the radar technician to the factory worker to the pilot flying his third sortie of the day on frayed nerves. The German failure was ultimately a failure of intelligence and strategic imagination. They fought the battle they wanted to fight, not the battle they were in. For the serious student of history and survival, the lesson is clear. Understanding your own system's vulnerabilities is as important as attacking your enemies. Resilience is built through redundancy, clear communication, and the conservation of force, whether on a national scale or a personal one. The stories we choose to remember from conflicts like this shape our understanding of preparedness itself. If you value this kind of grounded, systemic analysis of history that looks beyond the myth to the machinery of survival, then you belong here. Subscribe to War Machiner for more in-depth explorations of the conflicts and decisions that have shaped our world. If this video provided a new perspective, please share it with others who appreciate serious history. Thank you for watching.